Hi. Should unlock my computer. Sorry about speaking from notes, but I'm better at programming than speaking, and otherwise I'd forget what to say. I even had to write that sentence down. This one too. I'm Loren Brichter. I wrote an app called Tweety, a Twitter client that somehow got popular. It spawned a few versions, topped the App Store charts, won an Apple Design Award, and Twitter liked it so much they bought my company. This is the title. To rewind a bit, back in 2006, I got my first job at Apple on the original iPhone, working on the original iPhone. I was living in a small studio in San Jose, and my stuff got lost in transit. So this was my place for a long while. I needed furniture, so I decided to build some of my own. My first attempt was a complete mess. I didn't have a place to work outside, so I ended up cutting and sanding pieces in my bathtub. When I moved out, I found sawdust under places I never thought to look. The final product was pretty horrible. I mean, it was just 2x4 screwed together basically, but it worked pretty well as a TV stand. My second attempt was a little more ambitious. It was a bed frame. It was too big to do in my bathroom, so what I did is I set up shop in my car and I drove to Apple super early. The security guards would drive by the first couple days I did this and asked to see my Apple badge, and eventually they learned who I was. You can see my building 2 in Infinite Loop in the background there. So what I'd do is I'd clamp the pieces, and then at lunch I'd come back out and load them back into my car. And I designed the bed around what would fit in the trunk. So as I built more furniture, I learned some important lessons. The most important one was wood is pretty expensive. I used all solid hardwood for everything because I thought that was the best. But I could have saved a ton of money if I used plywood for some things. Now, plywood gets a bad rap. I mean, Steve Jobs even put it down at one point. But it has a number of advantages over solid wood. 1, it's way cheaper. 2, it's stronger. And 3, it's dimensionally stable because each layer of the plywood, the grain is laid down perpendicular to the last. So it doesn't tend to cup or warp in a certain direction. There's one big downside to plywood, and that's the edge. Whenever you cut into it, you see a cross-section of all the cheap filler on the inside. Basically, it's ugly. There are 2 ways to solve this. The first is with stuff called edge banding. It's a roll of paper-thin wood, real wood, with adhesive on one side, heat-sensitive adhesive. What you do is, wherever you have an edge of plywood, you take a roll and you glue it on with an iron. If you're good at this, you can make it look seamless. I mean, it's really an art. But if you're not good at it, it looks like what it is, a cheap veneer. That's the first way to solve it. The second way to solve it is to design your piece of furniture around the material. Maybe you can use plywood for 90% and get all the benefits. It's cheap, strong, stable, and you don't get any of the downsides. You use solid wood in the places to hide the edges. You design around the material. This could be seen as a cop-out, a compromise. Making concessions to reality means that you're not being true to the original design ideal. And that's true, but I'd argue that it's a good thing. Building anything is an exercise in solving for constraints. Constraints are critical. Without them, there'd be no place for creativity. When building an app, there's a fundamental tug of war between design and implementation. If the balance is tipped too far to the design side, you may end up with a product that's beautiful on paper, but requires serious concessions in other areas, like battery life or performance. If the balance is tipped too far to the engineering side, which happens in a lot of tech companies, you may even see products that are built completely by engineers before being handed off to designers to make it pretty. This doesn't work. If the process is out of balance, you get mediocrity. Instead, what you're aiming for is a virtuous cycle of constant refinement. and an idea that passes through design and implementation phases continuously. You can see this progression in Apple's own hardware. Just take a look at the original iBook. The candy-colored clamshell was a cheap plastic veneer snapped onto a frame which held the components, the actual computer. Compare this to the unibody design today, where there is no cheap veneer. The frame and the case are one and the same piece. This is honest design. It's built as it is. It is as it is. The clamshell is a lie. Three layers: components, the frame, and the shell. And how do we build modern software? Model, controller, view. We build software today the way Apple built laptops in 1999. We chase this dream of black box software components where you can make a change to one piece and not affect anything else in the system. But all changes have side effects. They warrant a reevaluation everywhere. It's the only way to get a truly seamless, tight, optimized final product. It's easy to do wrong, and it's hard to do right. Just as you can spend more time putting finishing touches on a piece of plywood furniture than actually building it, we can spend more time polishing an app than just getting it to work. I don't see that as a badge of honor. I see it as something wrong with our tools, our materials, or most importantly, our design process. Everything is design. And if graphic design and interaction design is done in one room, and implementation design is done in another, these are gears that may not mesh. You'll end up with seams and cracks in the final product. You need all three gears to mesh. What happens when they don't? Here's an example. Take the multitasking tray in iOS. Double tap the home button on the home screen, and you get the multitasking tray behind your screen. It looks and it feels like it's behind the screen. If you're in an app, the same thing happens. Double tap the home button, you get the multitasking tray behind everything. If it's behind an app and it's behind the home screen, it's behind everything on your phone. But what happens when you press the home button when you're in this state? The multitasking tray goes with the app. The cracks in the veneer begin to show. The illusion breaks down. How this was designed and how it was built diverged. This is not honest. Things need to be built as they are. The frameworks you use can either help or hurt with this. As another example, take core animation, an otherwise fantastic framework. I put a layer on the screen, and I want it to animate from here to the other side. So I make an animation object, and I apply it to the layer, and I tell it to go, and what happens? It moves. Well, what happens when the animation is finished? The next frame, it starts right back in the beginning. The animation wasn't real. You can add more code and set some flags to make sure it stays in the right spot when the animation is over, but the default behavior is to act as a veneer. It didn't actually move anything. How it's designed and how it's engineered, having these mesh is the difference between swiping something on the screen and having it track your finger versus swiping something and having it animate after you finish the gesture. One is real, one is fake. Choosing the right tools, the right materials, and having a bit of foresight lets you build things as they are. Lets you avoid all those rough edges that would otherwise need polishing at every layer of the product. Building things as they are means they are polished by default. It means less special casing, less tweaking, more time spent creating. Design is more than what it looks and feels like. It's also more than how it works. Design is how it's built. That's it.